Hello, my dear students. You are welcome to the course Human Behavior in Organizations, Ohrm 303. You've gone through a number of years already in this institution, beginning from level 100, taking so many courses in the business school, and this is one of your required courses, and you, of course, need to do so well in order to, progress. Now, we are looking at human behavior in organizations, and this is what this entire session is going to be about and what the entire course is going to be about. We are going to look at many aspects of human behavior as it occurs in the organizational setting. We are looking at sections 1 to 3 in this particular presentation, and for session 1, we are going to consider the nature of organizational behavior. Now, we will look at the basic nature of organizational behavior. And first, we need to understand what organizational behavior is. Greenberg and Baron, for instance, have defined what organizational behavior is, and they've looked at it from the multidisciplinary aspect. So they say that it is a multidisciplinary field, and this seeks to seek knowledge of behavior in organizational settings. And here it systematically studies individuals, groups, and then the organizational processes. Now, this is one of the definitions given by one set of authorities. There's also another definition given by Moorhead, as you can see on the screen. Now, it is very important for us to consider the implications of these definitions, because for the definition, we have it very little, but then it is really, really deep. One of the implications is that organizational behavior is systematic. We are saying it's a systematic study because we are not just looking at behavior as it occurs at one point in time. We are looking at behavior as it occurs over a certain period of time. And so when we are studying human behavior, or when we are studying organizational behavior, it follows a series of steps. It is methodical, it is systematic. Again, we say that the knowledge acquired is used to predict and then also to control behavior. Now, when we are able to study the behavior of people, looking at how they behave in a certain situation, then we'll be able to tell how others will also behave considering similar or same situations. And so we are able to predict based on certain occurrences. And again, the field of organizational behavior is concerned with the employment-related situations. For instance, we look at how the individuals come into the organization, that is the recruitment and selection processes, the orientation that they go through. We're looking at issues of absenteeism and also turnover intentions in organizations. So these are some of the implications of the definition that we looked at earlier. And so what are the primary goals of organizational behavior? One, it is to help us describe how people behave in different conditions. Of course, people are different. No two individuals are the same. And that is why it is important to study human behavior as it occurs in the organizational setting. If all people were to behave the same way, then there will be no really need for this course. But because we know that people are different, it is important to study them, to understand them. That will help us to describe how they will behave in different conditions. And so different people will behave differently in different conditions at any given point in time. Now, after describing behavior, we would also want to understand why people behave as they do. Why is it that some organizational members, or why is it that some employees are more motivated than others? Why is it that some employees are coming to work late? Why is it that some employees would want to leave the organization? Why are some happy? Why is it that others feel so agitated and they really want to leave the organization? So it's important that after describing behavior, we also want to understand why people behave as they do. And also this will help us to predict, because after describing and then understanding behavior, we should be able to predict future employee behavior. And so if you are able to study a certain pattern, that people are behaving this way, or they behaved this way last year or about 5 years ago, and this is what it led to. Now we are seeing same or similar behavioral patterns, and so we can then predict that based on what we are seeing now, it is likely to lead to this outcome. And so we are able to explain, or we are able to understand, and also to predict future employee behavior. And it also helps us to control and develop some human activity at the workplace. Now, once managers are able to understand why people behave the way they do, then they'll be able to, develop rules, regulations, and policies that will guide human behavior in organizations. So that is the aspect of control. We are able to control human behavior so that things will not just go out of hand. We are also going to consider the scientific foundations of organizational behavior. Now, when we talk about science, the first thing that comes into mind is about physics or chemistry or any other hard science, the hardcore science. But even every day of our life involves some science. We are talking about systematicity. We are talking about a certain order. Things being done, one thing being done followed by the other. Even taking our bath is a science. We start from one level, we move to the other until we eventually finish bathing. So when we are looking at the scientific foundations of organizational behavior, let us not think too far away into the hardcore science. So what is science? Applebaum and then Chambliss have defined science as a way of learning about the world through systematic theory and observation to provide explanation for how things work. Here again, we are talking about the systematicity. We are looking at how things are done from one stage to the other. And we apply science in the study of human behavior because we talk about observation. We need to observe how people behave in the organization. There is also experimentation. There are times we need to put people in a very controlled environment so that we are able to, as it were, control for certain confounding variables. And that will help us determine whether a certain variable leads to another. Shortly, we are going to look at what we mean by dependent and then independent variables. And then there is also a conclusion. So after observing, after experimenting, then we draw conclusion based on what we have observed or experimented. And this conclusion can be limited to the subject of study, or it can be generalized. That's depending on the kind of study that one is conducting. Let us also look at what a variable is. A variable, here we are looking at a dependent or independent variable. Now, let me just teach you something very simple over here. Usually, when we talk about a dependent and an independent variable, at times students get a bit confused. But let's look at this. Let's look at the independent variable first. For independent variable, let's look at a mother, or a woman who is pregnant. Okay, if a woman is pregnant, the baby in her womb is dependent on her. And so the mother is the independent variable. And so she is the cause. And whatever she takes in or her lifestyle eventually affects the baby in the womb. That is the dependent variable. So the mother is the independent variable, that is the cause. And then the effect, whatever she does, her lifestyle affects the baby in the womb. That is the dependent. So when we talk about a dependent variable, it is a response that is affected by the dependent variable. So the dependent variable is the effect, then the independent variable is the cause. So for instance, we want to look at the impact of motivation on job performance. So motivation over here is the independent variable, and they want to see how job performance depends on this independent variable, which is the motivation. So in research, or in most research, we come across these two variables. It is very, very common. Now, disciplines that have contributed to the field of organizational behavior. Organizational behavior did not just emerge. There were a number of disciplines that started so many years ago, and then some elements of those disciplines have contributed to the organizational behavior as a discipline as we have now. So we'll look at a number of them. We'll consider psychology, we'll consider social psychology, sociology, and then anthropology. These are the 4 main disciplines that have contributed to organizational behavior. There may be other disciplines, but these are the 4 key ones. So psychology. In psychology, we talk about the scientific study of human behavior and then mental processes. So basically, psychology is about the study of individuals. And in organizational behavior, we also talk about individuals. We talk about people working in organizations. And psychology has contributed in many ways to the study of organizational behavior. There are some of the topics that we may come across. We talk about things like personality, training and development, the decision-making processes, the employee selection techniques. Many of these came from the field of psychology. Then we move to sociology. Remember we said that in psychology, it is the study of individual behavior. Now, in sociology, we are looking at people in relation to their social environment. People in relation to their social environment. And so for sociology, its goal is, that is, the goal of sociology shared by organizational behavior is a scientific study of social relations. And in every organization, we have people who work in departments. They work in teams, they work in groups. And so they are working within a certain social setting within the organization. And so here we'll talk about organizational culture. Often we hear, this is how we do it in this organization. That is the organizational culture. Some will call it the corporate culture. It emanated from the sociology. We also talk about power and conflict. We also talk about communication. There are some of these elements that we will see in subsequent sessions. Then social psychology. What is the focus of social psychology? We are looking at influence that people have on one another in organizations. Of course, in every organization, someone has the influence over the other. We have leaders who influence the behavior of their followers. We have the manager, or we have the head of department, or we have the supervisors who direct or control the behavior of those under them. And so it has contributed to organizational behavior through topics or issues like change management, because someone has to initiate change. So there is that influence on other people. So they would either want to accept the change or they would want to resist the change. We also talk about the communication patterns, and then here again we look at power and conflict. Then we talk about anthropology. In anthropology, we are looking at the study of societies. And to be more specific, we are looking at smaller societies. We are looking at people in those societies and their activities. And then the question again arises, then how has anthropology contributed to the study of organizational behavior? Now, we'll also here talk about organizational culture, because in those smaller societies, people interact, and through their interactions, they are able to develop ways of doing things. And so we can say that for us, this is how we go about things. Now you would realize that the contribution of all these fields of study are quite interrelated. And so you find that in sociology we're talking about organizational culture, and over here too we are talking about organizational culture. So the other contributions of anthropology are very clear, and as you can see on the screen. Now, at this point, there are some activities on this slide, as you can all see, and at your group levels, you are all expected to discuss them fully and see how best you can respond and then answer to all these activities. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the very best in your revisions.